Good afternoon. Welcome to the third debate in the 2019 Longmont Observer City Council Debate Series. These debates are being co-hosted by the Longmont Observer and the Longmont Museum. My name is Shaquille Dalal. I'm a writer for the Longmont Observer and will be serving as tonight's moderator. I'd like to invite the candidates to join us on stage. The candidates for this seat, which is the at-large seat on the Longmont City Council, from my left to right. Well, I'll wait for them to be on stage first. I'm afraid not, sir. The candidates from my left to right for the at-large seat on the Longmont City Council are Joan Peck, Matt Garrett, Ron Gallegos, and Jeff Moore. To ensure that each of these candidates has a chance to respond to each question and an equal opportunity to make a case for their election, tonight we'll operate under slightly different rules than a traditional debate. Each candidate will start by making an opening statement of 2 minutes. There will be 12 total questions in the debate. The responses to each question will be led by a randomly assigned candidate. Assignments were made before the debate began. After the assigned candidate gives their response, other candidates may signal to me that they would like to speak. Each candidate will have 14 opportunities to speak over the course of the night, which they may use at their discretion, except that no candidate may use more than 2 of their opportunities to speak on every question. Each opportunity will last 2 minutes. The timekeeper is to my left. She will be raising a sign to inform you how much time you have left. She will notify you when you have 1 minute left, when you have 30 seconds left, and when time has expired. I may, at my discretion, allow further discussion on topics of particular interest, so in a manner which is equal to all candidates. We will end the debate with a 2-minute closing statement from each candidate. We will begin with the opening statements. The first opening statement is to you, Joan Peck.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to thank Shaquille and the Observer for hosting this debate, and thank all of you for attending. When I ran for City Council 4 years ago, it was to support our ban on fracking, promote smart development, bring rail to Longmont, create affordable housing, and make Longmont sustainable. Even though banning fracking hasn't been accomplished, I brought to city staff and council air quality monitoring at our airport and Union Reservoir, which should be in place by the end of the year. I'm still working on peak service commuter rail, helped frame an inclusionary zoning ordinance for affordable housing, and voted for a sustainability plan. The Sustainable Evaluation System and Wildlife Management Plan, which we are voting for this coming Tuesday, will help keep our city sustainable by protecting our sensitive wildlife and riparian areas, promote smart growth while allowing Longmont to thrive. However, we have more work to be done in all of these areas. The most pressing area is our commitment to 100% renewable energy by 2030. There's so much more that the city can do to move this objective forward. I'm asking for your vote so I can continue to work on all these issues. Thank you.
Matt Garrett, your opening statement, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Garrett, and I'm running for the at-large seat here in Longmont. I've never run for political office. I've never been in political office, obviously. I don't have all of the skill sets when it comes to speaking at things like this. But what I do know is that I was born here, I was raised here, went to high school here, and I've worked here my entire life except for a few years in my 20s when I left to live in Shreveport and then in Oklahoma City. I've been a 28-year employee for United Parcel Service, so I'm the UPS guy that's running for council that you've seen. Hopefully you've seen that. I've also been a 28-year member of Local 455, and I've been a 22-year steward of that local. So I am well aware of how important it is that you have good wages to support a community that can afford to live here. My wife, Amy, is sitting in the audience, and we also have 7 kids. We have 4 biological kids, and we've adopted 3 from Ukraine, which was quite an experience. I have a huge heart for people, a huge compassion for people when it comes to caring for them. I believe strongly in traveling overseas to get a different perspective on what the rest of the world lives like so we know just how good we have it here It's one of the things that I think we don't appreciate as a country altogether, is we have known, for the most part, especially the younger generation, has known nothing but prosperity. I want very much to be a part of City Council because I want traffic issues to be fixed. Not everything has to be at South Hover and 119. And there's just some other traffic issues and smart development that I think needs to occur in the city. Having been born and raised here, I've seen it grow. Lashley Street and Hover Road used to be the boundaries, and it's grown beyond that. Thank you.
Ron, your opening statement, please.
My name is Ron Gallegos. I come from the Abraham Lincoln School of running for office. I continue to run until I get elected. There's nothing wrong with that. When I first served on the council before, I went on with the idea that there were 10 things I wanted to accomplish, and we accomplished 7 of them. Again, I'm coming from that perspective. I think I've got a vision for the future. We're at a critical juncture in our community. I think when you talk about sustainability, we sometimes err on just one part of the initiative. Really, sustainability has to do with the balance in our community. And one of the things we need to balance is economic development, the downtown corridor, and where we're going in terms of affordability as a community. It's all right to talk about really being supportive of affordable housing and whatnot and the homeless, but when the council only allocates $1 million towards affordable housing, you can maybe buy 2 houses in Longmont, and then allocates $11 million to buying a farm. Why, it's better to be a prairie dog in Longmont than a poor person or somebody looking for affordable housing. So I think there's an opportunity for us to take advantage of our location, to really harness the economic engine of tourism. That means that I think we look towards the future, building a long-term commitment to our downtown corridor via a convention center with a performing arts center. That would help then drive traffic to downtown. We could then follow up with an initiative from 3rd to Main, close the main street there, make it a pedestrian mall. Then we've got 2 economic engines working already. Deal with the parking issue. We've been talking about parking garages for 30 years. Now probably is the time to really sit down and design some and build some. And then finally look at maybe a bypass at Airport Road around the lake to deal with traffic and the congestion. Thank you.
Jeff, your opening statement.
Okay, well, thank you for coming today. I'm Jeff Moore. I want to thank you all again for spending your time with us today on your Saturday. I served 4 years on council back right after the 2013 flood, and I'm looking to return to council to continue to serve the residents of our community. But first, a little bit about myself. Ingrid and I moved to Longmont in 1995. I came to work here as a manufacturing engineer, and I've made lots of stuff for different kinds of products. I'm currently the president of Tinkermill, and I've served on our HOA board of directors as president for over 10 years. My prior council experience gives me the knowledge and long-term vision so that whatever your station in life is, whatever residential neighborhood you live in, no matter who you are, I will make decisions that are good for the entire community, not just for the ones that make the most noise. So decisions made by council affect your everyday lives more than most state and federal policies. I have the ability to understand complex issues, and my proven ability to distill the facts into solutions is well recognized on my prior service on council. I am inclusive and considerate, balancing facts and numbers with compassion and fairness. We don't need council members who base policy on the past. We don't need council members that are pressing political agendas. That is why it is so important for you to elect a council person that thinks clearly and innovatively. You may not always agree with my vote, but I will always vote to keep Longmont moving towards the future. I bring what we need: proven experience, a strong conviction to do the right thing, long-term sustainability and resiliency in mind. I will work to build Longmont's future.
Ron, the first question in this debate is to you. Taxpayer-funded subsidies for businesses are often used to lure businesses to locate in specific cities or regions. This is played out on a national scale in 2018 with Amazon's contest to host a second headquarters, but on a smaller scale with the recent Smucker's plant established in Longmont. Do you think these deals are good for the city? If you are elected, will you be willing to use tax dollars to incentivize businesses to locate here?
I think that's a model or a paradigm from the past. I don't think there's the need to use those kind of incentives anymore, especially for businesses moving to Colorado, especially businesses moving to this area when we're so close to Rocky Mountain National Park. I think it's a privilege, and I think we should negotiate from a position of strength, not weakness, which means I think we have a lot to offer for our community. I think businesses coming in would find it a feather in their cap to be located here. So the idea anymore that we have to incentivize, that we have to bribe, that somehow we have to pay people to come to our community is an old notion. It's one I don't subscribe to and wouldn't advocate or use any longer.
Would any of the other candidates like to respond to that question? Joan?
Thank you, Shaquille. I don't think there can be a universal paradigm for that. We have very different reasons for bringing businesses into Longmont. For example, let's take Smucker's. We were only one of about 3 sites they were looking at. Each one offered different amenities, different resources to them to come to whatever site they chose. They chose Longmont because of the amenities we gave them, but also because we wanted them because of what they could bring to our city, to our region, which are employees, dollars, good paying dollars, and property tax, et cetera. And what I want to say is that we do not give a bundle of money to businesses up front. For example, we just had AstraZeneca, which we were working with, to go into the Nelson plant. We offered them amenities, they pulled out, they did not get a dime from us. Nothing up front is given. So it is not right to just put a blanket statement on that. Each business is different, our needs are different depending upon the business, and they all need to be looked at differently.
Jeff?
I would have to also agree a lot with what Joan was saying. We have to look at each individual opportunity based on its own merits. It's an appropriate investment in Longmont when we get well-paying jobs and we get a company like Smucker's, for example, who has made the biggest investment they've ever made in the U.S. in their history, building this plant in Longmont, Colorado. They paid up front for all the tax incentives they're getting. If they don't produce jobs, they don't get that back from their initial investment. Those are clawback provisions that we put in all these types of agreements. They also coordinated with the state as well, so that it wasn't totally on Longmont by itself to bring that company to Longmont. We also, I think, need to look at something similar for smaller employees. Say they want to bring 10 employees to Longmont. What can we offer them? These, especially if they're making good decisions in Longmont and paying well. There was recently a company that didn't produce the jobs, and they had to pay back the money that we gave them up front. So it is a give and take. But not for those incentives. Smucker's would not have located here. We wouldn't get those 500 jobs, eventually 500. We're starting with 200, but they're going to continue to expand and bring in another 200 or 300 jobs. So yes, I believe those incentives are appropriate, and I also will support that only for certain employers that bring value to Longmont.
Ron?
You know, I think the proof is in the pudding. I was on the council and we did incentives to bring Amgen in. They oversized that electric station there. That has the capacity to carry more energy than the city of Fort Collins, the college, and Anheuser-Busch combined. They were here for a short while and then they pulled out. It looks like it's just a question of economic incentives, but it's not. We oversize roads. We take in consideration school capacity. There are a number of things that we don't do. Then the dirty little secret is this. When we incentivize, we really need to figure out what we're paying per job to the city, because all these jobs do not come in for free. And the numbers become very astronomical when you're only getting a yield of 200 jobs. So I don't think you need to operate from a position of inferiority or weakness, but rather strength. And I think we're at the point of development in the city. I think we can take pride. I think we need to be strong when we negotiate. And there are lots and lots of good, clean paying, high paying businesses that would locate in our community if we take the economic story on the road and really ask. And I think that's what we need to be. We need to be more thoughtful. And I disagree with Joan. I think there's an old paradigm. It is incrementalism. We've always done things this way. We're going to continue to do this activity in the same direction and under the same circumstances, and I don't think that's correct. I think once in a while you need to stop, think about how you're doing things, and take a different approach.
Matt?
I think you also have to remember that human nature plays into this a lot, and that is if you pay somebody to do something and they're not invested in it heavily themselves, then the natural inclination is to pull out because it was easy to leave. If they owned everything, if they had paid for everything, if they had brought all of it in with all of their own money, then it's something that they would have stayed longer for or stayed forever because they owned it all the way through to the end. It's like being a homeowner wanting to buy a house and having the bank pay you to buy a house. And when you live here on the Front Range, we're not having to incentivize people that want to live here. They want to come here all on their own. And I agree with Ron that we have a position of power that we need to be bargaining with and not just throwing money at people. And that said, you do have to give maybe a little bit of incentive, but not to the extent that we have. It's just one of those things. It's human nature. If you can get it paid for, you're going to take it, and then it's easier to pull out.
Joan?
So just piggybacking on that, it is not just the City of Longmont that is giving incentives. We work with the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, and they are actually the ones, that organization are the ones that are helping bring these businesses to Longmont. Longmont has had to be marketed in order to get businesses interested in us for a while. We are becoming, especially with Nextlight, we're becoming more and more of a place where people want to be, where businesses want to be. But the idea that we cannot accept a company in our city without working with them in a partnership, be it economically, be it incentivizing, I think that is wrong, because these companies that we are working with have many different states and sites that they're looking at. So if we want them here, if we want those jobs, then we will have to partner with them. Thank you.
Ron?
Let me say, my background is I was with Fortune 500 Corporation for 18 years. I was a middle manager. I was a product, a process, and a project manager. I've had my own businesses now for 18 years as well. So I've met a payroll. I know how to read a financial statement. And Joan, I was on the Economic Council Board of Directors. I was also on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was a liaison to the Transportation Advisory Authority or board. So I know from what I speak. I have had the experience. I've been on these commissions. I've watched these issues. When I suggest that we don't have to incentivize, that doesn't mean we don't go out and have a positive interaction. We don't become thoughtful. We don't go out and recruit the kind of businesses we want to have. In fact, I would work with the Economic Development Partnership with a big board and say, what are the kind of businesses we want to have in our community? What kind of community do we want to offer our citizens? What kind of a wage scale do we want? So I don't think we have to go hat in hand to anybody. And again, I think incentives are old school. I don't think you have to promise anybody anymore. I think we are a big enough draw. I'll give an example. If you're a professor and you're applying for a position at the University of Colorado, you agree to take a $15,000 to $20,000 cut in pay to be able to live in Colorado and live in Boulder. And people line up to do it every day. I think they would do the same thing here in Longmont. Thank you.
Jeff?
Well, I would have to respectfully disagree with the statement that we don't have to provide incentives. Longmont went through a target industry evaluation back in 2014 that I participated in. And one of the big industries that we in Longmont can support was food and beverage. So this Smucker's deal was along the line of what we can provide the employer. It's not just what we give the employer, it's also what the employer is looking for in a workforce. It's also what an employer is looking for in where they can get their low-cost water, electricity, internet service, water and sewer. I mean, it's important to them as well as it is to everybody in this room. Providing incentives is a long-term investment. Sure, they got some help getting their plant built and get started with plan review and all kinds of fee waivers, things like that. That's okay, because they're going to be here for 40, 50, 75 years, and they are going to be continuing to pay taxes to this city. They are going to be continuing to pay a payroll to people that live here locally that will spend their money here and support our businesses. It's more than just the city council giving them money. It's about creating an ecosystem here in Longmont where we can support an economy that will keep everybody at a sustainable level of living and a good place to live. And that is what Longmont's really about. How have we in the past made it so that people could come here and thrive here? That is what Longmont's about.
All right, let's move to the next question. Jeff, this next question is to you. With the growth of the population in Longmont, housing has become less affordable for many people who have lived in Longmont their whole lives. What is the right way to ensure that the construction of housing for high-income new residents does not make living here unaffordable for existing residents?
I'm not totally convinced it's a cause and effect with high-income residents moving here and pushing people out. I think that what we're seeing is that the demand for housing is high enough that we don't have a big enough bank of housing for people to move into. With that, and when that happens, we end up with escalating prices of housing. So there was an ordinance passed last December by City Council to help with that workforce housing level anyway, where the inclusionary housing ordinance will help people buy a house at 80% of AMI and 60% if you're a renter, so 60% of AMI. Now that doesn't necessarily help the people at the lower end of the scale. That was not addressed in that ordinance, and it probably should have been. I don't know why council decided that they were just going to say, we're not going to help the people that can't really afford to live here, regardless of whether Longmont was growing. A lot of those people were still struggling finding housing. So with that, what we need to be looking at is how do we help that demographic. We have an affordable housing fund, and if one way that affordable housing ordinance, inclusionary housing ordinance can help is if developers choose to do cash in lieu, which goes back into our affordable housing fund, which then goes back out to help subsidize housing. So we have affordable housing and we have subsidized housing. We have to take care of both demographics. The upper end seems to be doing just fine on its own, but the toughest solution is going to be finding how do you get to that 30% of AMI that's not covered under inclusionary zoning today. Longmont can help, but Longmont is not the solution. We actually have some good developments going on that will help address some of that.
Joan?
I agree with Jeff, and I was a little frustrated with our ordinance that we passed that it did not address the lower end of the AMI. However, we do have, with the affordable housing, and I need to correct Ron a little bit when he said we have $1 million in the Affordable Housing Fund. That's $1 million a year that we put into Affordable Housing Fund. Plus, we have half of the marijuana tax that is going into the Affordable Housing Fund. We also have, as Jeff has said, cash in lieu. That means that if developers do not want to provide the 12% of affordable housing that the ordinance says must be put in every new development, they can give us cash in lieu of that so that we, as a city, can provide housing. Now, the city owns land that we can hire our own developers to develop that land for the lower AMI. We also have Boulder County that is producing lower AMI on the corner of 6th and Kaufman, and that is ready to be developed. There's county land within this city that is owned by the Boulder County Housing Authority that is mandated to be used for lower income housing or mixed housing. So all of those are options for us, which is exactly why we have the cash in lieu, which is why we have the Affordable Housing Fund. It's really hard to get developers to build that lower income. It is not profitable for them. They don't want to do it. I understand. But we do have other means that we can participate with the county, participate with the state, and get that lower income affordable housing.
Matt?
All right, so this brings up something that's really something that I was amazed at. About a month ago, I started doing some research on Boulder County and Longmont and open space. And if you go to the Longmont, City of Longmont Open Space Master Plan, you'd be shocked at how much open space Boulder County actually owns around the city. If you highlight all of that land, it's about 75 to 80% of the land has landlocked Longmont. It's effectively, it's a wall of property built around Longmont. And because there's a wall, the things that are within that wall, that circle, the prices escalate. And then developers have to pay a lot more money to be able to purchase that land. And then when they have to pay more money to do that, then they have to charge more for the housing. And when you start forcing people to do things, you're going to have pushback. And forcing developers to add 10% or 12% to affordable housing, all it's going to do is force them to push back or cut costs or do something else. It's going to force them to want to build high-end units and even less affordable housing. And so you really need to take a look at what Boulder County has done. And I'm not saying that's not a quality of life issue. I'm just saying that when it comes to affordable housing, it's hard to build affordable housing when you're landlocked by Boulder County and you need to be able to expand and you have nowhere to go but up. When you go up, developers want to build high-end units. And so I think it's important to recognize that a lot of this comes from not just Longmont, but from sources outside Longmont. And we need to own that land, or what's left of it, because it's a big deal. Because when we decide what we want to do with it, then we need to be able to be the ones that make the decision and not have to go to some other municipality or some other entity to be able to do that.
Ron?
I was on the council that instituted the original inclusionary zoning, and during the life of that program, in excess of 650 units were created. I guess I disagree with the notion that we can't meet the needs of affordable housing, especially renters. When the market dictates, and it has dictated that all these apartments are going to be built, we could have really incentivized through ordinance, that's what we call it, incentivizing, the builders to set aside 30% affordable for people who are renting apartments. That would address the working poor and our young folks in town. That's an instrument, that's a tool we have. We have that instrument at the time of annexation. If we don't exercise it then, it goes away because of the way the state law reads. So that's a missed opportunity. And I'll grant Joan that, yeah, it may be $1 million a year for affordable housing, and we'll throw the other in, so maybe it's 4 houses you can address in Longmont. But that's not going to really address the issue. As far as the city taking the initiative to build affordable housing, we saw what happened when they had the opportunity with the mall. Those of you out there remember, when the mall was in foreclosure, the city could have purchased the note for $6 million and kept the existing anchor tenant in place. We chose not to. Instead, we've encumbered ourselves to the tune of about $72 million. All kinds of tax incentives or giveaway. So we don't have a very good track record as a city of going out and developing, and I don't think that's their expertise. The city is not a development agency and shouldn't be doing that kind of work anyway. But there are things I think we need to begin to address. Density. We need to begin to talk about vertical building, because that's the only option we have. Thank you.
Jeff?
So there's, I think one thing that we can all agree on, that the housing stock that we need in Longmont needs to be diverse. And we need to make sure all types of housing are available, whether it be rental or ownership, or whether it's communal living, or there's just a whole bunch of new models that have been coming out over the last few years. We also need to recognize that we can't stop growth, and that's where this question really started from. People are moving here, we're growing, and now people can't afford to live here. I'm not going to argue that point. I think that that's a big factor. However, there are things we do and have been working on. The current council is working on a revamp of the zoning ordinances. So smaller lot sizes, height bonuses, move your housing near transit so people don't necessarily have to own a car. That's a big cost for people. Incentives for infill and redevelopment. We need to make sure that we are not looking to be sprawling. If we don't address the current realities, all we're going to do is increase sprawl, drive up current pricing that already contribute to more traffic, and have people looking further out to come to work. So we have to make sure that there are affordable options here in Longmont. And just one more point about the Affordable Housing Fund. The Affordable Housing Fund does not spend money to buy housing. They loan money out to develop low-cost housing. And when they do that, they leverage that money 7, 8, 9, 10 to 1. So if they put out $100,000, they get $1 million of investment out of that. And that money comes back into the housing fund over time as they pay off that loan, generally are zero interest. So it's a good way to make sure that we can support housing, but we don't provide housing.
Joan?
So I want to correct the way I misstated that the city bills it. I say that because we work through the Longmont Housing Authority, and we give money to working through the Longmont Housing Authority and getting CDBG grants, matching funds to get more money, as Jeff had said, to give to Longmont Housing Authority to purchase land to build the housing that we need. The city itself does not do that. We partner with LHA. And I do want to address what Matt said about open space. The county itself is not buying open space. The residents are doing that. This goes to a vote of the people, including Longmont, who is a part of the county. The people want the open space. As a matter of fact, council just approved Longmont buying a parcel of open space in northeast Longmont on Highway 66. We also have conservation easements over open space, which means that we cannot do anything with that land unless the conservation easement, which could be Boulder County, which could be another agency, saying that they have to agree what we do with that land before we do anything with it. So selling it, building on it is not an option. It has to go back to the people to vote on that if we do anything with it.
Ron?
Yeah, and my day job is a mortgage broker for commercial loans. But there are a lot of investors, Joan, that personally want to thank you and thank the Boulder commissioners for all the open space, because it's been a terribly good investment for them. They've made a whole lot of money, which means that they're depriving other people from being able to live in Longmont. The question we have before us as a community is, do we want to become another Boulder? I think for years and years and years, Longmont has had its own character. It's had its own ability to grow and have a vision. And I'm not against open space, but I think there has to be a balance. If we kill the economic goose that lays the golden eggs, suddenly we're going to become an area that really just caters to retired people who come here from California, those empty nesters who are following their grandchildren. There's nothing wrong with that, but there are a lot of young people who would like to work and live in Longmont as well. And we're not unique in this problem. Minneapolis just adopted an approach to do away with single-family residence zoning. And they said that is the most exclusionary way to zone, because you can't have any high density. You can't have duplexes fourplexes, apartment houses, you begin then to create a situation where viewscapes somehow become an inherent property rights, even though they don't, the property in front of the view does not belong to them, and that prevents then from building up, because that's the only way we're going to succeed. And if we are going to get a new urbanism where we walk to work and live downtown, there isn't no product or available land. You're going to have to build on existing sites, and you're going to have to go up. At some point in time, we're going to really need to address this, because I was late to debate today because I didn't plan on getting here at 2:30. I thought I'd have plenty of time. I was coming from Northwest. There was an art walk, and there was a train.
Thank you, Ron. Let's move to the next question. Matt, this question is to you. Another strategy some favor to stem the increasing cost of living in Longmont is the construction of high-density housing, such as multi-story apartment buildings. Many residents in Longmont cite increased traffic, decreased property values, and changing the character of their neighborhoods as objections. What is your plan for resolving these conflicts while keeping the cost of living in check?
So this is a softball for me, I think. When you build up instead of out, then you're not going to have sprawl. One of the things that the city is doing that I love, and I hate it at the same time, is the South Main Station, where they're going to have businesses on the bottom, retail, and then apartments up top. The reason I hate it is because it's on my route, and I'm going to have to service it. So it's going to be hard for me to figure out how to do that. It's going to fundamentally change what I've been doing in that area. But I love what they're doing because of the tax revenue per square foot is going to skyrocket because you're building up. When you have parking like that that's off the street and underneath or whatever it is that they're going to put it there, then you have a walkable community. You're not having all these vehicles. And I just love the fact that they're doing it and that they are doing it, although it took forever to get going. I watched the food plant get torn down, and then 3 or 4 years later, it started taking place. And so all over the city, whenever there's spots that need to be redeveloped or vacant space that needs to be developed, I think the city needs to look carefully at building up these 5-6-story buildings in such a way that it maintains our small town feel, but at the same time, it's going to add a tax revenue and a tax base. It's going to just be great for the city. I've heard other council members talk about how having spread out some of these businesses are, where they have a single-story complex, and then you have parking lots, ground-level parking lots. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it when you can get $6,500 per square foot per year, as opposed to building up and getting $600,000 per square foot. It doesn't make any sense. So I am all for building up and using the space that's available. Even space that needs to be redeveloped can be redeveloped in such a way
Thank
that
you, Matt.
it's. Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you. I agree with Matt, and we've addressed that in our land development code. We using smaller square lots, one car garages on some of these places to reduce the number of cars, to reduce the amount of building space. And we are looking at, this Tuesday, we're going to have a pre-session on our Main Street corridor plan, looking at from 9th all the way to 23rd, perhaps to 66, at some of those spaces that you were talking about that are one-story, old spaces, and looking at maybe some of the owners looking at a different way that they would like to develop that land. So we are addressing that, I agree, and it's a good plan, I think, going forward.
Ron?
I guess I agree with Matt, and I think that's the wave of the future. My caution is that these things can't happen in a vacuum. In other words, the transportation needs have to be addressed at the same time that we develop are meeting the needs of development. Because if we don't, we're going to have a problem like we have right now, which is come 3 o'clock and a train or a parade, and this town shuts down. And that's not the way to efficiently operate a town. So I think we need to be thoughtful about that approach. I think we need to do a bypass someplace. And as much as we can, with the growth corridor plan and whatnot, we need to really be concentrating on getting those people living and working downtown, and then begin to cut the number of modal transportation needs in terms of cars, which then begins to speak to the other issue. You know, we were sold a pig in a poke by RTD in terms of the light rail line. And we could be taking that money, and we could be doing something internal to the city with our own transportation, and to kind of hem and haw and pass on. I think we need to dance, which means I think we ought to file a lawsuit, and I think we take that money and we put it in an escrow account, and when we settle the lawsuit, we get our money back with interest, because they keep pushing the horizon out. It's 2020, it's 2030, it's 2040, it's 2050. The way it's going, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will never ride a train in Longmont.
Jeff? Excuse me, sir. Matt?
Yeah, so going back to the traffic issue, something very, very specific, because I deal with it every day. I have to go back and forth on Martin about 6 to 7 times a day, and if I sit at one more train going back and forth, because that's where they build them. I mean, I don't know how this would work exactly, but I would love to see a bridge over Martin Street. Just put one in. I'm not sure you could put one over Ken Pratt, definitely not over 3rd where it crosses 3rd, and, but put a bridge over Martin Street.
Or a channel.
Yeah, or something that's going to allow us, because they got it over Pratt, so that's one way that people dodge, but then everybody dodges it, and then everybody's on Pratt Street. So to get a bridge over Martin, I think, is something that I would like to see done. I don't know the feasibility, but I know City Council loves to do studies, so I'll be more than happy to do a study on what it would be like to have a bridge over Martin Street, especially because that's where they build them. It would give the city one more opportunity to avoid or to keep the city from being stopped like Ron was on his way here, because that's all it takes. And also one more thing is that at South Hover and 119, I know that's a great place. It's always been a great place, but it's not the only place in Longmont to go that you should be able to go. That's why everybody ends up on Ken Pratt Boulevard on Saturday afternoon. And if you've been on Ken Pratt Boulevard on Saturday afternoon, you don't want to be there. People avoid it. Also, you almost need an algorithm to get out of Target, because that's where everybody's at. It's just one of those things where it's a nightmare at that corner, because everything is built there. Where I live, out near 17th and Pace, there's almost nothing, which means we all have to drive, which means we all have to get in multiple cars, sometimes 2 at a time because of the way our schedules work. Something needs to be put out northeast, because it's just not going to work for much longer to have everything built down in that corner of the city.
Thank you, Matt. Jeff?
So, sue RTD, $45 million. They've already spent the money. Don't even go there. We're not going to get that money back from RTD. They've already invested it in other corridors. So suing RTD is not going to accomplish anything. It's going to make a bunch of lawyers rich. I think when we talk about our traffic issues in Longmont, though, we have to recognize that a lot of that traffic is not specific to Longmont. We live on 2 major corridors, 287 and 119. There is no transportation option other than your car if you live in Firestone and work in Boulder. And how are you going to get here? 52? Have you tried 52 in the morning? 119 is probably it's bad, but it's even, 52 is even worse. So I would have to say that if we're going to do this, we need to partner regionally and not be so stuck on what Longmont is. Because we are seeing the effect of the growth outside of our city, we also are feeling the effect of having all that traffic. So we need to be working towards more transportation options. We need to get that bus station built down at First and Kaufman. We need to get RTD off their butt and put in a parking garage down there so that they can get their 300 spaces where people can go and catch the bus to go to Denver, go to Fort Collins, go to Boulder, share that space with all the transportation options that we have available. Things like bus staying, moving people from I-25 to Longmont. We have the flex service from Fort Collins to Longmont, and also Fort Collins to Boulder. The flex doesn't stop in Boulder. Why not? It seems like that we should be sharing these resources regionally and making sure that we end up with a transportation option that works for everybody. We also have not even heard one word about how do we manage the last mile.
Thank you, Jeff. Joan?
Thank you. So first of all, we are working on transportation issues constantly. We have the 119 BRT study that is going on, and it is slated to be done by 2022. I've been working on the Northwest Corridor Peak Service for basically 6 years. We do have a coalition of the 5 cities on the Northwest Corridor, which is Broomfield, Louisville, Longmont, Westminster, and is that it? Boulder. So I just learned today from our RTD director that Dave Genova, the executive director of RTD, has more information on BNSF. We're working more closely with them to get a cost analysis for that. We are we do have a TOD in plan for the garage on Main Street. We're working with RTD. They're putting $17 million into that project. Tony Chacon is working on that, who is our urban developer. We have a coalition with not only those 5 cities, but with Commuting Solutions. Jared Polis, our governor, is working with us. So that is moving forward, and I think that we can make the 2030, 2026 plan for the peak service. The traffic is coming from Weldon, Larimer County. That is true. So those 2 things, BRT on 119 and the peak service, will eliminate a lot of that commuter traffic. CDOT now is working on the interchange and BRT on Highway 52. So I just want everybody to know that we are working on this. It is something that the city takes very seriously. If we sue RTD, we must have a plan in place for our transportation. It cannot be a knee-jerk reaction.
Matt?
When I hear about information coming from RTD, I'm going to quote my mom growing up: baloney, because it's not going to happen. And we need to stop it. We're not ever going to get those tracks the way they are presenting things to us. And not only just one track, but I have talked to traffic engineers that say you can't do it with one track, you need 2. It's just not going to happen. We need to stop it. And even if we can't sue, even if we can't get our money back, we need to cut our losses. Because RTD has been telling us that if I told you something for 15 years and did exactly opposite of that, and then I told you I needed 20 or 30 more years to come good on it, you would have nothing to do with it. Every one of us know that intrinsically it's wrong and it's not going to happen. It's time to stop it. Also, I would like to see, now I don't know how many of you have been on Highway 66 lately, but that also needs to be 4-lane. 119 doesn't have to be the only road coming into Longmont that's 4-lane. Highway 66 is dangerous. I drive it often with my job with UPS, and I've seen multiple accidents, not to mention I almost completely avoid it at certain times of the day because it is nothing but a caravan of traffic. I would love to see Highway 66, speaking of regional cooperation, go from 4-lane all the way from I-25 to Lyons, and then that would relieve a great deal of the traffic that's coming in on 119.
Jeff?
So I went back and I looked at the 2004 ballot language for the Fast Tracks funding. It says, construction and operation of a fixed guideway mass transit system. The word rail is not ever mentioned in that whole ballot language, which is a page long. What that means is that it's a separate right-of-way for exclusive use of public transportation and high occupancy vehicles. So that we could move today out of the paradigm that rail is the solution into a solution where we use existing right-of-way, potentially even existing infrastructure to move people throughout the region rather than have them fixed sitting on a train somewhere. Trains are 18th or 19th century technology. Why are we looking backwards? Why aren't we looking forwards? We're going to be seeing autonomous vehicles. Why aren't we looking at how do we accommodate autonomous vehicles when we can actually put Another vehicle in between every car that already exists on the road, doubling the volume of traffic we can handle, going at 80 miles an hour, not needing to worry about accidents. That is the future. We need to be thinking future, not train. We have to make sure that we are thinking forward so that when I'm gone, and I've hopefully done my mark to make that happen. So rather than spend our money worried about fast tracks, why aren't we looking at how do we get other BRT? Plus, we lose sight of all the other 0.6% that goes to base services that we are still getting no service for. So we need to get moving on it. The future is coming faster than we realize, and if we can think about the iPhone was not invented until 12 years ago, that is how fast technology advances. If we think about 2050.
Thank you, Jeff. Ron?
So I have been advocating that we need a bypass. And I think 95% of that bypass has been built along Airport Road. The interesting thing is I've also seen capacity studies that show that the Airport Road is being utilized at less than 10%. That means that we have this wonderful stretch of road and nobody's using it. So I think we should have a conversation with our friends in the commissioner's office, tell them that we want to build a link around the lake to 66. Then we have a natural from the exchange now that's going on to 66 and around. That would help eliminate or alleviate a lot of those north people who are going to Bertha or Fort Collins or to Cheyenne or to Canada, all points north, but they're not going downtown, and they're only clogging up our streets. So for a relatively small investment, a few $1 million, we can create a link around the lake. And to add to what you were saying on 66, DOT is conducting a study right now, and they're asking for public comment. So they are having hearings. I've been invited to a couple and have attended one. So I think unfortunately, the relief isn't instantaneous, but I think they're beginning to think about it, and they know that there's a need, because you and I see it every day. Those of us that live on the West End, it's just crazy.
We are, just a reminder to the candidates, we are now 3 out of 12 questions into the debate. Each candidate receives 14 total opportunities to speak. By my current tally, Joan has used 6 of them, Matt has used 4, Ron has used 6, and Jeff has used 5. We'll move to the 4th question. Joan, this question is to you. Since 2004, the City of Longmont has been paying $4.5 million per year for rail service between Longmont, Boulder, and Denver that has still not materialized. A set of apartments at the intersection of 1st and Main, including a commuter train station, is expected to be finished this year. And yet RTD does not expect to begin rail service until 2050. What, if any, actions should the city be taking?
First of all, I would like to correct the 2050 timeline. The 2050 timeline is nothing more than the projected revenue, financial time for all of RTD, for the base, for fast tracks, for everything. Just like we project our plan out for 20 or 30 years, that's all they've done. At the NADA meeting that I was at yesterday morning, I learned that 2030, 2035 is when the next funding will be available. It is not 2050. We have a bond that is going to be paid off by RTD in 2024, alleviating some revenue from that bond that will no longer be used. So every 3 or 4 years, a bond is going to be paid off, making more revenue available. The 2050 deadline is nothing more than the total, as far out as they're going to project anything, base, fast tracks, building. The peak service, rail service is needed in this city. It's commuter rail. And as far as single tracking it, there have been 3 cities that have single-tracked using BNSF lines successfully, and within 10 years of doing that, they had full build-out. It's great to say that we should put every autonomous car between every other car on the road. That's a great paradigm to use, but that means building more roads. It means we not getting any tax dollars, any gas tax dollars for that. We did not pass Proposition 110, which would have put a lot of money into our traffic solutions. We don't have that funding. So all of these expectations, all of these incredible ideas, we need to use the paradigm at this point that we have. I have asked an outside attorney to look at our,
Thank you, Joan.
so there you go.
Matt?
All right, I also don't know if we want to put cars between other cars right now, because I was on I-25 yesterday and I felt like there were cars between cars anyway. So I'm not sure you want to add any more to that. And I'd also like to correct the timeline like Joan did. It's never going to happen, ever. I don't see it ever happening. Because of that, I want us to cut our losses. We could have used that $45 million to build out our own thing. And I don't know what that would look like exactly, but fast tracks is something that works. So I've traveled to Ukraine, Quito, Ecuador. I've been to South Africa and Swaziland. I've been to places where trains work. They have to have them because it's congested, number one, and number two, almost no one owns vehicles. As long as people own vehicles, they are not going to be compelled or incentivized to ride on trains. 3 weeks ago, I came back from Colorado Springs. Coming up I-25, one of the fast tracks is paralleling us. Empty. It was totally empty, even though the interstate was jammed up. Downtown, when I'm going up and down Main Street, or even up and down Kimbark, or the alleys, or even 3rd Avenue or 4th Avenue, I see them all the time. The buses are empty. No one rides it because there's other choices. And those who are riding it, some people who do ride it, they ride it for free, because not only are we paying for it, but we're paying for people to ride free with a fund that I think is expected to double, go from $350,000 to $700,000 a year. It's wishful thinking to think that it's going to work here in this kind of environment. As long as people have cars to drive, they're going to drive them.
Jeff, would you like to speak to this question or the next one?
I would, yes.
Okay.
So 2035, that's still a long ways out. RTD doesn't have anything on their information that's publicly available that says it's anywhere between 2042 and 2050. So I would challenge that assertion that we're going to have something before then. Because let's look at the facts of the situation are, there are 4 rail corridors not built yet in the RTD system. You can build 3 of them for half the cost and serve twice the number of riders. If I'm a RTD board member, is it a responsible way to spend public money to only serve half the people at twice the cost and twice the maintenance cost? It is not a responsible use of tax dollars. Autonomous vehicles, I've brought this up. Autonomous vehicles are coming whether we want them to or not. And that gives us an opportunity to put more cars on existing roads, not build new roads. That also gives us a way for us to move into the future. We have to be future-proofing our city and our region. We have to be future-proofing Colorado. And if we're not thinking about how we're going to do that today, then it's never going to happen. So I would say that, we can throw these numbers about what year or whatever. Northwest Rail is the least beneficial to the region. It costs $1.5 billion projected, and that's before we know how much BNSF is going to charge us. So we need to be thinking about 21st century solutions, not 18th or 19th century, I see not 1800s, so it's 19th century technology, we need to get away from that thinking and move into the 21st century, because we're already almost a quarter of the way through the 21st century, and we need to catch up.
Joan?
Thank you. As I started to say, I agree that if this does not work out in the timeline that our city and the MCC wants it to work out, that we should sue RTD. And I have been working with an attorney looking at the hold harmless agreement that we have with RTD, as well as the ballot language. And yes, we can sue them. There is nothing holding us into that. But it is a board decision, an RTD board decision. These are part of the things that we're trying to work out as to whether we can get out of the district. And that is the problem with special districts, is this is a completely different government that we are dealing with. We do not have a say in it. It is the board of directors that has a say in it, with very little legislative oversight. So if this does not work out with the peak service, I am committed that we would sue them and get out of that. We will not get our money back because the R in RTD stands for regional. We agreed to be part of a regional district. The money that we put into it went into the region. So there is nothing for us to get back. Again, that would have to be something that an attorney and the courts would decide. But that is the way it is written at this point. If we get out of this district, we have to have a plan. We have to have plan A and a plan B, which means that if we're even deciding this, we need a task force, decide what we are going to do for local transportation and regional transportation, because we will not be part of that district on the regional bus system, the regional rail system. So it's a bigger issue than just saying we need to pull out. And I am willing to actually be part of a task force, which LEDP is already putting together to look at this issue.
Ron?
And we can sue for assets. Assets are buses. So let's take their buses, if nothing else, if they won't give us our $45 million back.
Excuse me, sir. This debate does not include audience participation. Ron, are you finished?
I'm finished. Thank you.
Jeff, the next question is to you. What should the goals be for robust public transit inside Longmont? Do the existing RTD routes meet those goals?
Do they meet the goals? No. There's 4 lines in Longmont. They run on some major corridors, and a lot of times you don't even know if it's going to show up. So no, RTD has not fulfilled what I would consider a reasonable solution to Longmont's internal transportation problem. City Council has been funding the fare box. Basically, they're providing a free bus service in Longmont for ridership within the city, which is a great thing to do to encourage ridership. That only adds to the taxes we're already paying, because those are taxes you've already paid, and then we're paying again. So in a way, it's a good investment in my mind, because there are times those buses are totally full. And I would not want to be a city without a bus system or without public transportation, because that's the size of the city we are. We need a better public transportation system. But just to go back and beat up on RTD a little more, this year, the number I got was around $300,000 to buy up the fare box. Next year, RTD is coming back with $700,000 to buy up the fare box because we increased ridership. No more cost to them, but they want to more than double our payment for the fare box. So I don't know whether that's going to happen. That's a council decision. That's in our budget, I would hope. But I would support more public transportation. And if RTD is not going to do it, we need to find a partner who will provide that service for us in Longmont, and the city could help get that going, not only through providing the opportunity to figure out who could do that, but also provide incentives to help provide ridership as well. If we're giving them $700,000, we could give somebody else $700,000.
Thank you, Jeff. Ron?
During the course of the campaign, you have an opportunity to talk to a lot of people. And I was approached by a woman who's a 77-year-old woman who has to go to the doctor. Now, she lives in Northwest, and her doctor is in Southeast. So using the existing bus system, it takes her 4.5 hours to get to the doctor. So I really challenge that. So, Matt, I went out on a Saturday. I had my coins in my hand, ready to go, and I sat and waited for the bus to come. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And the guy in the donut shop must have taken pity on me, because he came out and he says, "They don't run on Saturdays." So we need to get serious about our own internal transportation system, our own internal fleet of buses, and quit paying RTD. That means we have to be thoughtful, and now we have an opportunity to design a program that will work, which will mean that we're going to have to do some tough things. One of the things we need to probably think about is get rid of free parking downtown, because we need to drive the behavior. We need to drive the behavior to use public transportation. And we can do that, I think we're beginning to do that, with bicycle lanes and whatnot, encourage multimodal transportation. But it has to be convenient, it has to be efficient, and it has to work.
Okay, let's move to the next question. Ron, this question is to you. We're
Well,
moving
I
to
just answered one. Go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm teasing.
We're moving to a new topic. Sanctuary cities are localities which have passed local ordinances and set policies limiting their local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. Should Longmont be a sanctuary city?
According to Chief Butler and some of the testimony I've heard them make and some of the claims, we are a sanctuary city in everything but in name. So we've not done an official resolution doing that, but I understand that unless there's a legitimate law enforcement need for them to participate with ICE, they're not going to go out of their way to turn people in and whatnot. I guess my take is this, and I support the notions of sanctuary cities, and if that's the majority of the council wants to go in that direction, by and large, then we should. But my notion is this: when I'm running for city council, I'm running for city council because I'm concerned about potholes and library books, police cars, zoning regulations, and whatnot. So resolutions that speak to a national problem that we can't even solve are not germane to the job I'm signing up for. If you want to make foreign policy, go down the street to Boulder, because that's what they love to do. Every minute we take away from the staff concentrating on these other programs to talk about resolutions and whatnot is a minute that they're not devoting to the needs of the city. And if you look at the budget dollars, and according to the newspaper, I was the last person to do that in any detail last year, we continue to grow. We're leaps and bounds, and we can't be everything to everybody at all times. So I think we have to be thoughtful in our approach. We have to deliver the most efficient and forward-looking services for our citizens, and that's my pledge. That's what I'll be about. I'm not going to be howling at the moon. Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you. Yes, we have a police force, a police department that is protecting our residents. The term sanctuary, to me, is just a term. I have all the confidence in the world that our police department and that Mike Butler is protecting our residents. But I disagree with the idea that we should not be having resolutions, because we are leaders in our community and people come to us and want to know if they are going to be protected, if they are going to be supported. And we can resolve to do that, and it sends a message to the rest of the state that Longmont cares about the people and Longmont will protect the people. I see no problem with resolutions at all. That is what we are supposed to do. It doesn't mean we're making policy on it. It doesn't mean we're setting an ordinance. It's just saying that we take a stand. And as a leader of the city, I will take a stand in honor of our residents.
Jeff?
So this issue came up while I was on council. I think it was 2017, the spring of 2017, if I remember correctly. And I would have to say, with the feedback I was getting from the community, and the issue as emotional and as strident as it was on both sides of the issue, it wasn't one-sided at all. I had a real concern that it was going to divide our city. And what we ended up with, I think, was a compromise that actually accomplishes both sets of goals in that conversation. What I didn't want to do, and I also heard from Chief Butler and Dan Benavides that they didn't think sanctuary city status was going to help in the community. So I took their advice. I've listened to everything, and it was an excruciating decision to not go with a sanctuary city status. I mean, the whole purpose of a sanctuary city is to protect the rights of all the residents in the city, whether they're undocumented or not. That's our constitutional rights. And our policies already did that. And so I felt that going beyond that was only going to create tension and strife within our community. And as a council person, you have to consider that. It was a very hard decision. It would have been easy just to slap a label on us. That wouldn't make us that unless we had those policies. So I think it comes back to where we want a safer community, where everybody reports crime. How it's, we want to make sure it's not impacting our schools because kids not going to school. And all the stress and the anxiety that was causing in the community was not worth the label.
Matt?
So my problem with designating it as Longmont as a sanctuary city, it's not because I don't want the people that I work with and live with here to be protected and feel welcome. It's that when you designate your residence or your place as a place where you're going to break the law, then where does that stop? What's the next law that we're going to be sanctuary about? And then the next one. The rule of law matters. That's why we have a constitution. Now, I deliver my area for my job at UPS. I deliver in an area that is largely Hispanic. They are the nicest, best people on my route. I have no problems with them at all. And I have not knocked on one door and had somebody run away from the door or act scared or been assaulted at the door because they thought somebody from ICE was there. The people who live here need to feel welcomed, but we also have a rule of law. And I just think it's a slippery slope. Again, and I may refer to this more than once, human nature is that if you invite people with no boundaries and no sense of order, it not only creates disorder for them, but it also creates disorder for the people who already live there. And at the end of the day, that's not going to be good for anybody. So I want all of us to feel welcome. I mean, if anybody should feel, when you build a wall of property, speaking of open space around Longmont, that's not making people feel welcomed. So you have to find a way to work with the people that want to be here, but do it legally. I brought 3 kids from halfway across the world, and I did it legally, and it was hard on us, but we did it.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. Joan, this question is to you. Longmont is 30% Hispanic, a population which is disproportionately likely not to respond to census takers due to recent changes in federal immigration policy. Census counts impact state and federal legislative district drawing and apportionment of federal funds for Medicaid and infrastructure funding, among many other programs. Should the city have an active role in maximizing census participation?
Yes, we should. And actually, we do have someone in our city, Aaron Fosdick, who has taken this over to be the one who is actively pursuing census data. I think that we need to engage the Hispanic community. We need some to be part of this census documentation because they are the ones who will also benefit from it. The more people that we say live in our community, the more people that we can take care of in our community who tell us they live here, the more dollars we will have to do that with. It's going to be difficult for the Hispanic community to be engaged. And it is something that we need to look at very hard and actively get them engaged in this census taking. It's not just the Hispanic community, though. It's the Nepalese community, it's the Vietnamese community, it's the Japanese community that we have here. It isn't just the Hispanic people who may be undocumented. So it is everybody in this city that we need to get engaged in this census taking. It's important to all of us. So yes, I do think that we should be actively engaged in it.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would agree that it's not only just the benefit of Longmont, But it's also an opportunity to engage the Latino community in a conversation. When you're at their door, you can ask them questions about, Longmont, especially if they're Longmont census takers. I know they have a questionnaire and all that stuff, but at the same time, you're reaching out. The Latino community does not reach into the city. We have an obligation to reach out into that community. An example of this is we have 20 boards and commissions. There are only less than 1% of the participants that help us with the city are from the Latino community. So what we need is a way for us to reach the Latino community, get them engaged in making policy. Those boards and commissions advise city council on policy. So this is one way for us to get them involved with that. Having the city have city has systems in place that can help us get to that population. We already have other partners like the Multicultural Action Committee, I think it's called. But anyway, it just makes a lot of sense to make everybody feel included in Longmont, not just the ones that we have identified if we want to talk to, or we want to, this stage right here is a good example. There's not someone here that's not able to afford the council pay to serve on city council. That is something that is always going to be probably a problem. However, if we aren't reaching out, they're not going to come to us, and we can't expect that.
Ron?
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I don't think it's just this one instance on the census. That's kind of an interesting one. But I think all groups in the community need to be involved with the city, need to be involved in boards and commissions. And in some instances, it's going to mean that we have to shift our paradigm, that we can't put an ad in the newspaper and expect people from the Hispanic community to respond, which means that we have to build bridges of understanding and work with the community and get to know them as individuals first, and then begin to recruit them into the boards and commission process, as well as all levels of city staffing. My wife was an attorney, and we call it the every man on the street question. So what would every man on the street think? Well, if the city is 30% Hispanic, every man on the street would think that all levels of the city should kind of reflect the community. All levels and boards and commissions should reflect that community. So we have an excellent program in the police department called Ride Along. I think we need to have that kind of a program for young people and people out in the community to get the training they need for boards and commissions so that they can become involved. It kind of an experience that opens up the city to them and explains what the processes are, what the departments are, how the city is funded, what obligations are, so that they understand where their tax dollars are going. So it isn't a mystery anymore, so that they know that they have a stake, as well as you and I and everybody on the stage, in the future of the city and where it's going. So I think it would behoove us, for the census, but also for boards and commissions, and for the long-term health of our community, to get everyone involved.
Matt?
So I'm sure there's a lot of psychology that goes behind why people don't participate, and obviously one of them is fear from being found out. That needs to be something that they don't have to worry about. And so that goes back to the larger issue of the immigration policy, something that's way outside the scope of city council. But from a personal experience, I know that when I bought my home in Ecuador, when I go to Ecuador, I can walk around the streets with confidence because I own property there, I'm legal. And I can do things. I can rent cars, I can fly on the planes, I can move about freely. And that's important to the psychology because it means I can participate in the community, which I do. I don't speak Spanish. I'm trying to learn Spanish. I speak just enough to start World War III probably. But it's one of those things that because I'm there and I feel comfortable participating, that I do. So when we're here, or when people are here, one of the reasons that they don't participate is fear of being found out. And to me, that's something that we need to find a way by making everybody here in some way either legal or legalizing them, but making them feel like they can participate. Because really, at the end of the day, when you knock on that door, they're either going to answer or they're not going to answer, depending on how they feel about what's going to happen when they open that door. When someone approaches me on the streets, when I'm overseas, I don't feel a lot of fear because I know I'm there and my status is legal. And that's what I want to see for everybody that's here, is to feel comfortable participating.
Matt, this next question is to you. Like many cities, Longmont and its residents rely on police to address homelessness-related issues. Does it make sense to make this the responsibility of police? Is there a role for the city government in encouraging non-governmental social capital to address these fundamentally social problems?
So the ultimate responsibility should not fall on the police, because usually when it gets to the level that the police are involved, a lot of times it's not going to go well. I personally think that there are ways for committees or different people within the government who are there to support an organization or some kind of way of populating people who want to help. I don't know why we haven't tried soliciting residents of Longmont and giving them an opportunity to sign up on a list that says, between November and April, I will take in one person or two people, and have that as a way where the police, if they do come in contact with the police, or private organizations, can actually contact these people directly and say, are you available? In other words, 5, 6, 7 dozen families who say, I will open up my home. And there are people here who will do that. My wife and I have opened up our home to 30 exchange students. We have opened up our home to, we've actually looked on Craigslist and we've taken in, 2 or 3 single moms with kids who are completely displaced, took them right into our home, no questions asked. That's a big risk, I get it. There's a lot of people that aren't comfortable doing that. But it should be done with people who want to do it, who have a heart for it. Because if people have a heart for it and you're not compelling them or coercing them to do something, then it's one of those cases where that's not a hurdle you're going to have to jump. People out there have a heart to do this kind of stuff. And that's who you need to focus on, are the people that want to do it, so that when you contact them, they also have half a dozen or a dozen families that want to be involved. Not just put them in a house for a night or 2 nights, which is not bad. I mean, if we have those, we should be able to use those. But tap into the community and let the community voluntarily become involved in getting some of these people off the streets.
Ron?
I mentioned my wife, who's an attorney, and she always says, sometimes people wait too late to address an issue. And they can address it at that point where it's the most expensive, or they can address the issue upstream. I think the issue with the homeless is very similar. We see the homeless when they're in the crisis mode, when the police and the caregivers have to intervene because it's kind of at the crisis stage. I look at the program that's very successful in terms of the parking patrol that's made up of volunteers that assists the police department with people parking in handicap zones. I think we should recruit people, volunteers within the city, working within the city structure, to talk to a lot of these homeless people, find out what their needs are. Lots of them are mental health. Lots of the needs can be are health related. Lots of their needs are dealing with the bureaucracy, the structure, and they don't know how to deal with it. They're in a fragile situation. Sometimes they just need to empty their cup. They want to talk to somebody and explain what their situation is, what their difficulties are. I think that kind of program is worthy of some attention and worthy of some support.
Jeff?
So the issue of homelessness, the police really should be, their primary mission should be and continue to be enforcement of our laws and the state laws, making sure that they're providing a public safety function. Part of that could be helping homeless people find those entry points into the system. There is a program going on now where we're, in my opinion, still testing it out, the coordinated entry program, which has had some limited success. However, I don't know how much funding that's going to take, how much long that's going to take. I mean, everybody has a different story when you talk about homelessness, whether they lost their job or whether they have a medical emergency. They didn't have the safety net or the resources to find that. So that coordinated entry is trying to help find ways for them to navigate through the bureaucracy that we have to help homeless people. Longmont is a city with a lot of compassion and a lot of services and a lot of agencies that provide help for homeless individuals. These are human beings and they need compassion, and we need to understand that they didn't, in most cases, they did not choose to be there. So the city has, I think, a larger role in assisting other agencies in providing their services. How do we help us collect enough information on individuals for them to enter the system, provide some funding, maybe even provide a city lot so that they can have a safe lot to park their cars if they're homeless in their cars and they don't want to go to a shelter. The one thing that I am really concerned about is if we build a homeless shelter, what does that mean? For me, if it doesn't provide wraparound services.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
So another personal experience here. I'm driving around the Weaver Park business area for several weeks, probably a month or two, and I see this guy living in his car. Finally, after about 2 months, he disappears, and I see he's got a job, so I think he's okay, but now he's living in his car at this location. Then a few months later, I see him back where he was parked before. Finally, I stop and ask him what his story was, find out he's from Minnesota, he came here to work, he's living in his car constantly. My wife and I invited him into our house. He came over several months. He would come over once a week and shower. He would come over and clean up his car. But at the end of the day, we gave him money, we gave him food. My wife gave him sometimes more food than she gave me. But we tried caring for this guy, and his mentality was that's all he wanted. He was gonna live in his car. There are people out there who want this lifestyle, and walking down the breezeways on the 300 block of Main between 3rd and 4th Avenue and 4th and 5th, there are people that I've walked down when I'm delivering that they are literally collaborating with other people who look like they're homeless because they're all kind of gathered together. I've seen them. They talk about, we can go here for this service, we can go there for this service, and we can go here. Once we've tapped out and gone to the well there too much, we're gonna move on to the next city. And I'm telling you, I've heard it, I've seen it. Don't tell me that that doesn't happen, because it does. And there are people out there who want the help, and we should give the help. And again, I'll go back to volunteers, people who actually want to be a part of this. Then you're not coaxing people into doing it. That's a big deal. When people want to do something, you don't have to coerce them into doing it, then they're more likely to answer their phone at 10 o'clock at night and say, you bet I'll take that person in. And they'll do it. And when you give to others more than you take from yourself, the reward actually comes back to you much more.
Thank you, Matt. Joan?
So, all of these are great suggestions. The coordinated entry system with Boulder County is a housing first model. The problem is we don't have housing first. So we have had 2 community meetings. They're not really community, they are study sessions on Friday mornings that the city has had, that city council has had, bringing all of the providers from the local area who are providing services to homeless people, be it addiction, be it housing, be it psychological, and listening to what they have to say. Next Friday morning is our last meeting with council making decisions about some of this information that we have gathered. Safe Lots is on the table. Matt's idea of having volunteers, advocates, all of these issues hopefully will coalesce into some kind of policy that City Council will put into an ordinance. RVs being parked on the street, where do we put them because they are dumping on the streets or in our, well, they're just dumping on the streets, to be quite honest. So we need to have a place for them to go, get something around police so that they have some some oomph. They can do something with the people as far as where we can place them. All of these are options on the table. Having volunteers, save lots, and that's what we're going to be discussing next Friday morning. So I'm glad that there's this interest. We've been working on this for a long time. It's a very difficult problem. So.
Okay, there are 4 questions remaining in the debate, just an update for the candidates. I have Joan having used 9 of her opportunities to speak, Matt has used 8, Ron has used 10, and Jeff has used 9. Our next question, Ron, is to you. The Pool and Ice Center on the ballot is a debt-financed Olympic-sized swimming pool and ice hockey rink with a 30-year cost of $72 million. If the ballot measure passes, the debt will be repaid with an increase in the sales tax of 0.18%. The city's own feasibility study projects a $600,000 per year loss, which will have to be covered from the general fund. Do you intend to vote for or against this project in this year's election? Why?
I probably will vote against. And years ago, we sort of gave the impression to the people of Northwest Longmont, when the opportunity arose for an additional rec center, that would be the location, and Garden Acres would be the spot. My rationale is that if we're going to build an aquatic center, it would make more sense to build an oversized pool component at a rec center in Northwest Longmont. I think the desire of the community is more in that direction. There are questions about the fundamental use of the pool, who will be using it. Like anything we do in terms of an amenity, recreation centers, golf courses and whatnot, from an accounting standpoint, those are all cost drivers. They're red on the accounting books. They don't bring in revenue. But that's part of the function of government. I think Winston Churchill said, taxes are the price for a civilized society, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we need to be efficient in our approach, and I guess I have great reservations, even though some of my friends in the business community would disagree with me, for the need of the aquatic skating rink. I think it's just too limited a facility. It serves too few people. I would rather spend those dollars, if we're going to spend them, on a rec center in Northwest.
Joan?
I won't tell you how I'm going to vote because I don't want to influence anyone else's vote. However, at our Transportation Advisory Board meeting on Monday night, the director of the Recreation Services said that this would not make any money. That makes me very nervous because we have to have $500,000 in ticket sales in people using it, plus the ongoing tax increase for the $600,000 plus O&M operation for this. That's $1 million a year to operate this pool. If it passes, on City Council, I will advocate that we hire an event planner, that we do not let this be part of Parks and Recreation to figure out how we're going to pay for this. If it passes, we have got to have that events there back to back to back, so that the $500,000 does not come out of our general fund plus the $600,000 tax increase. So I think it's up to the people. If you want to do this, then I am for it, but it's a bigger picture. The event planner also would be for our art district, for the art complex that we're planning and getting a feasibility study for. It's a bigger picture for all of Longmont. It's not something that we go into lightly. This is a huge deal, and I'm going to wait and see what happens.
Jeff?
So a horse, a chicken, and a dog walk into a bar. It doesn't matter. My vote doesn't matter. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to vote, but I am going to tell you this is democracy in action. The council has decided that this is the best course of action for our city. It's up to everybody in this room and the whole city of Longmont to vote it up or down.
Matt?
I think one of the ways you can approach this, I've heard it called the Ice Palace. I've heard all kinds of different names. That would obviously be a negative. But so I would like to see, I would rather have seen the council try to find a private firm that would come into Longmont, help them get some land if they need it, but not much. Don't incentivize them too much, but help them get the land. And if a private firm who are professionally designed to make this thing profitable, if they can't find a way to make this thing profitable, then that is a good indicator of its viability. The city even admits that it's going to lose money for years on this thing. I think that I'm not sure if I think it's a great idea to bring in a facility that can't meet private organization standards, knowing that you're going to lose money, and then design it in such a way that it feels like it's going to be something that's used by a small population of people. And I understand the concept, if you build it, they will come. And more people will just come ice skating, or there will be a little bit of swimming. And I understand the school district is also willing to pay for the amount of time that they're using it. But again, it's all about who's going to control what. And if you build this thing and you lose it money or year after year after year, we as the City of Longmont, we are going to own it, and we're going to own that debt for years. And Joan alluded to government control over property, the frustration over not being able to decide how to use it. This is a perfect example of government overreach, in my opinion.
Joan?
To address the comment made about having a private company come in and do this, at the very onset of the second feasibility study, when council wanted to move this forward, my concern was that we had voiced the fact that the school district was going to be a partner with us. That is not true. The school district does not have any idea or any concern or reason to partner with us. If we build this, the school district's off the hook as far as having an incredible place for their students to compete and to practice. They have said that they will rent lanes from us, but it's not going to be enough, in my opinion, to offset the cost. So again, it's a democracy, and if it is something that the people really want in their city, I am completely for it.
Joan, the next question is to you. The primary expected user of the pool is the St. Vrain Valley School District, which is not contributing anything to the financing of the center. If the ballot measure passes, should the city require a capital contribution from the school district?
I would like to say yes, but I think it's going to be too late. If the measure passes, then we are mandated to make it happen, whether the school district wants to participate or not. The school district has already said they're not going to make a capital investment in this. So I think it's a dead issue once it passes.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the bond issue is about, shall the Longmont taxpayers tax themselves to build this facility? The school district's not involved with that part of the language. So I don't see them even having any interest. I'll say it again, there is no interest in the school district to invest their capital money when they need to build schools for our students in our school district. That is their primary mission. If we can provide, if it passes and we provide a facility they can use, then they will be paying for the time they use the facility, the O&M cost of operating that facility. And that will also go into paying down the debt. So I want to make sure that we understand, it's not the city's students and the school district's kids, it's our kids. If it does pass, I will support it. And I think that if it does pass, there will be enough groundswell support to actually improve the financial status of that facility.
Ron?
Traditionally, in most communities across the country, competitive swimming and high diving are sports within the educational system. Traditionally, in most communities across the country, the school district is at the lead on this kind of endeavor. It's been explained to me that most of the function for the aquatic center and the need is for competitive meets, competitive diving, competitive swimming. And that's the same for the ice rink. That it's supposed to be for competitive hockey playing and intramural sports and whatnot. If that in fact is the case, really the area of the responsibility for this endeavor, I think, lies with the school district. And I think we're going to be a penny wise and a pound foolish to get involved in this endeavor. If we want to get involved in an endeavor where everyone benefits and there is a return to the community, and they know it's going to cost something, because I said earlier, rec centers don't make any money. Let's build the rec center in Northwest, oversize it so that we can meet some of those swimming needs. There probably wouldn't be a component for the ice skating rink.
All right, we're going to close the debate with the last two questions on the environment. Jeff, this question is to you. In 2019, the City commissioned an air monitoring study at two locations, Union Reservoir and a location east of Longmont, to determine whether oil and gas activity in Weld County is impacting Longmont air quality. The first results will be released in 2020. What action would you take if it is determined that oil and gas production is introducing pollutants into the air in Longmont?
Well, I do support air monitoring. I think it's important for us to know if there is anything we need to be concerned about. And if we don't monitor the air, we won't know. So yes, I support the concept, and I actually support funding of that activity because it affects every resident in the city. What I would do with that information, we have no authority to impose any sanctions on any of the oil gas operations operating outside of the city limits. That's the responsibility of the state environmental health and safety. I think that's the department. Anyway, the state monitors and controls the air quality and reports on it on a regular basis. I would provide that information to them and request or demand that they go after those polluters so that they can come into compliance and reduce the impact of their operations on us when they aren't even next door to us. A lot of what we see is over in Weld County, and it moves to the mountains. We are in that path. We're going to see that. We're going to have exposure to that. And we don't need that. But as a city, it's not our purview to actually take any enforcement action against that. That's the state's purview. And if the state doesn't act, then we're going to have to elevate it. I don't know where, but we're going to have to do it because it's important. We don't need people dying because they're breathing bad air.
Joan?
Thank you. This air quality monitoring is going to be done by Dr. Detlev Helmig from the University of Colorado. The results of it are going to be on a website. It's the same website that the county has, but there will be a specific location on it for Longmont, perhaps another tab. It's open to the public, and the results of that are open to the public. They get to do what they want with it. It's not necessarily city council's purview, like Jeff said, to do anything with that data, but it is our purview for the safety, health, and welfare of our citizens to let them know what's going on. We've all seen the ozone alerts when we're driving down I-25 or I-70, so our air quality is bad. But what the environmental groups can do with this, if they would like to, is take it to the state, to COGCC, to COGA, to the legislature, and say they are not adhering to the EPA standards. At that point, they can request fines or whatever it is, standards that the legislature wants to take on that. But for me, this is education. What is happening in our city, and what can you, as residents, do about this, holding the legislature and the gas and oil industry to the EPA standards.
Matt?
In 2008, I took a trip to a place called Mariupol, Ukraine, to adopt our first daughter, a teenager from there. Part of the process was driving down to the Sea of Azov, which Mariupol is right on the Sea of Azov. As we got closer to the sea, you could not breathe. I've never been in a place that was more filthy, my eyes burned. You couldn't breathe. You could smell it. You could taste it. It was so bad because that entire coastline, there's about a 9-mile coastline that is nothing but steel factories pumping stuff into the ozone. It's awful. It's where Russia built a lot of their ships, so they produce a lot of steel. That is an example of where you could identify exactly what the problem was. The closer you got to it, the more it affected you. And I very much am in favor of monitoring the air, because these groups that want to help us have clean air, they have to have loud voices, and they need to be able to bring these things to the front of the discussion, because they'll get ignored if they're not loud. And quite frankly, I agree with a lot of the stuff they do. But in a case like this, how do you monitor where the air is coming from? Is it coming from Kansas? Is it coming over the mountains from Wyoming? It's the air. I don't know how you determine it, although there's proximities. I understand there are proximities, and there will be a way to somewhat identify it. But again, how do you impose sanctions, or how do you go to the state and say, this particular place? I just don't know how you identify it. Great information, great to have it. I just don't know what you do with it, other than using it to impose stricter EPA standards.
Ron?
You know, as an old Catholic boy, there was the sin of commission and sin of omission. The omission in this particular sin is there is something on the federal books called the Clean Air Act. And if negative air is impacting our community, we can be sanctioned, regardless of what the state law says. Whether those regulations will change, I don't know, because it's a dynamic situation in Washington right now. But we can be blind to it, but there may be repercussions. We may have to deal with the issue, whether we like it or not. So yes, I think it behooves us to monitor and keep, an eye on what's happening, whether it be oil and gas or a cookie factory or whatever. But if it's having an impact on the community, that health and welfare clause that Joan mentioned earlier is a big stickler, and we're on the hook for this one. If it gets bad enough, and that's what happened to the city and county of Denver, and when the feds came in, they mandated that they had to do a cleanup, and they had to come up with a plan, and the plan had to be sanctions or working with those industries, kind of the cost causers. So this is a problem that's bigger than a bread box.
Jeff?
So the data we're going to get, I think, is very important. Knowledge is power. We can take that to our legislature, we can take it to the state, we can let them know that, hey, we're being poisoned. It's time for you to step in and act. The state actually only has a few oil well inspectors. If we can point to we have a bigger problem here in Longmont, they can actually focus more effort on identifying those particular sites. Without that information, though, we won't have a leg to stand on, and we won't know if it's getting better or getting worse. We need to take this first snapshot in time, which is coming up soon, right? But at the same time, we need to continue to monitor it, because our education of our residents, they need to understand what is being done to our air and what is being done to our people.
Okay. The last question in this debate, Matt, is to you. This summer, Governor Jared Polis signed into law SB 19-181, which allows home rule municipalities to ban fracking within their jurisdiction. Last month, our Longmont and Colorado Rising got a Boulder County judge to reopen the case regarding the legality of Longmont's 2012 fracking ban on the basis of the passage of that law. Should Longmont ban fracking within its jurisdiction? Should the city take a side in this coming court case?
I agree that Longmont should not have fracking within the city limits at this point in time, because I just don't know, and I think a lot of people are unsure. Even though there's a lot of good information that says it's safe, for some reason it just sits wrong to have an oil well next to a school. I'm not sure what it was. Trail Ridge Middle School, I lived out on the northeast side of town there, had an oil well that was, 100 150 yards away from the school, and they eventually shut it down. As it stands right now, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. At the same time, there's personal property rights involved here. You got people that want to be able to tap into what they own. It's theirs. They don't want mandated to be told what they can do with it. So you have to weigh public health with personal property rights. One of the ideas that I don't know if I came up with it myself. I probably heard it, and it might cost a ton of money. But the city, if there was any way that the city could buy up the personal property rights and all the mineral rights within the city limits and lay it to rest. And that way they don't have to worry about fracking being done within the city limits. The only way it could be done is if you put it to a vote of the people 10 years or 20 years down the road or however long down the road, and they said, hey, now that fracking has been proven that it doesn't do this or it doesn't do that or it is safe, which is going to be hard to do, then they can vote it in, and then the city can tap into owning those mineral property rights and those. It just allows the city, once again, to decide what they want to do with their property. They would also tap into the tax revenue and the revenues that come from drilling if they decide to do it. You just have to be careful when you start tromping on people's personal property rights in addition to the health issues of the community.
Joan?
So the city took a neutral stand on that because Colorado Rising really did not sue the City of Longmont. They are going to the district court to overturn the Supreme Court's ban on fracking. So we're neutral. We're going to see what happens, what comes out of that jurisdiction. What we have done, though, in the city is to, on all the public property, close all the wells on the public property and move them out of town. That doesn't do much for Larimer or Weld County because they moved their wells there. We do not have fracking on private property that I know of except for Union Reservoir. I said private, I mean public. We do have fracking under Union Reservoir. We've not been successful. I am totally against it. We have not been successfully to get that removed, which is why I brought up the air quality monitoring program and brought that to Longmont. We need to understand what's happening. But at this point, we're just taking a neutral stand.
Ron?
The citizens quite clearly passed the initiative. I think that needs to be considered. But, Matt put his finger on it, in legal circles, there is some question about the constitutionality and the issue of taking and making those people who have the constitutional right in the state in terms of mineral rights whole again. So that is a big issue. And we've seen this play out with the Greeley case. And just because we have a legislative initiative doesn't mean that at the end of the day, constitutionally, it will be found sound. This is one waiting for the jury.
Jeff?
So I take a stand a little bit further past fracking. If we are going to have local control, using our zoning regulations and ordinances to determine where heavy industry is built and developed, we can also just say we are not going to allow oil well development in Longmont. And by default, that would also ban fracking. Not ban per se ban, but if you don't have an oil well, there's no reason to frack. They say the jury's out. I have talked to people that live next to these operations, and they say that while they're doing the fracking operation, they feel it, not only through the ground, but also in the air. Their eyes burn, their nose waters, they're coughing. So fracking, they say the jury's out. I'm not convinced the jury's out. I think they're starting to get enough enough data to say fracking is not good for us. It's also not good for the environment. It uses tons of water. How much we need water in Colorado to be used for agriculture and human consumption. We don't need it to go down in a hole in the ground, never to be used again. That is one of the reasons that I did support the fracking ban when they were litigating it. I was on council. And at that time, the city council supported going ahead with that lawsuit, defending the lawsuit against our fracking ban. So yes, I think we have to talk about oil well development as a whole and fracking as a secondary issue.
Joan?
I would love to be able to talk about oil well drilling as a whole. And I am totally against fracking anywhere, ever. However, to say that if we don't let oil wells within our city limits would eliminate fracking is not completely correct, because the oil industry can frack 2 miles away from their drill site. So they can be outside the city limits and still frack under our city, which is probably happening at the moment. If there was a way to totally support our ban on fracking and get it through the Supreme Court, I would be completely for that. I don't know. I think that this Colorado Rising going to the district court to have that ban overturned at the Supreme Court is a first step. Let's see what happens there and see if we can move further. If there was any way we could not frack under Union Reservoir, I would really support that. I don't know how to do it at this point. It must come from the legislator. It has to come from COGCC and COGA.
Ron?
And Jeff, my comment was not about fracking, but about the legal process. This thing is still being adjudicated. And what the courts finally decide, I don't know. All I'm saying is there's fertile ground for dispute, and it will go on from both perspectives for a while. So that's all I'm saying. Generally, my preference would not to be having fracking in the community. I think it's an endeavor that can take place outside of community boundaries. I think some of the technologies there that would prevent us from having the need to have it take place in the community, and I would encourage people to use that. But the larger issue is still out there, and when I make a pun towards the jury being out, that's what I'm really talking about. The legal issues are big and weighty, and they're going to be wrestled with for a long time.
All right, let's move to closing statements. Jeff, you are first.
So I want to thank you all for spending your time with us today, and thank the Longmont Observer and the museum for hosting this event. You've heard different perspectives on the issues facing Longmont. However, I am the one who will consider all sides of the issues and make decisions that benefit all of the residents of Longmont, not just a few. Special interest and partisan thinking should not be driving council decisions. I make pragmatic assessments based on facts, and I make those decisions based on data, and while considering the impact to all of our residents at the same time. I am the candidate who will fight for our environment. I enacted a resolution to reduce the impact of pesticides in our community. I support the goal of zero carbon electricity by 2030. I have and always will fight oil and gas development and its pollution in our city. I am the candidate who will support entrepreneurship and innovation in our job market, supporting startups, small businesses, and large employers to create and bring jobs to Longmont is vital. I am the candidate who recognizes the need for housing for all. I will look for and support ways to provide housing for low-income residents. That includes those not provided for in our inclusionary housing ordinance. Stopping growth will only make Longmont more expensive if we don't build housing. I am the candidate who has a proven track record of objective, thoughtful, and pragmatic decision-making. I don't have an ideological agenda. I am someone who will make the decision that looks to the future and make decisions based on that. I am the candidate who is looking to the future. I respectfully ask for your vote.
Matt, your closing statement.
So I'm the candidate that was born and raised here. I've been here my whole life. Longmont has a different feel for me than I think everybody else here on the stage. And not that being from here changes or that's the most important thing. But I'm telling you, I grew up here, went to high school here, and I've worked here my whole life. I listen to people all the time on my route and when I go to my different events. I have a slogan on my card that says, "Some for all for none." My wife hated it. A lot of people hate it, but I love it because I have to explain it, and it gives me a chance to talk to people. And when I say that there is some for all for none, what I mean is there's going to be something for everyone. I'm going to listen to everyone because I have ideas all over the spectrum. I appeal to a broad base. You are not going to be ignored. That's the sum for all. And when I say that there's all for none, it doesn't mean that if I get elected that I'm going to vote down a certain agenda and just advance it whether it makes sense or not. That'd be dumb because people have ideas on all sides of the political spectrum. I don't care what color you are, what your take is on something or anything else. If you have a great idea, it's a great idea and it should be advanced. I don't care where you land on the political spectrum. If it's a bad idea, regardless of whether I agree with it or agree with you in other areas, if it's a bad idea, then it needs to be shelved. I'm the one who's been here my whole life. I feel it differently than anybody else. I grew up playing in the oligarchy. I grew up riding mini bikes around here, shooting BB guns at each other and having dirt clod fights. I know what it's like to survive here. It's a great place. It's in my heart, and I know that I will represent every one of you in a way that you'll be proud. Thank you.
Ron, your closing statement.
We are up here kind of trying to get a job. We're doing a job interview. And I guess I would suggest that I bring a wealth of experience, tried and true. I'm a visionary. I've got a plan. I've got a plan for economic development through tourism. I've got a plan for dealing with downtown. I've got a plan for building a convention center and a performing arts center and making that an attribute that will drive financial and tourist activity from that area to the downtown area. I've got a plan for transportation. This would ring hollow if I hadn't been involved in previous councils that had a plan, that built a museum, that built a rec center, that bought Sandstone Ranch, that put Next Light on the table. So my experience is tried and true, both in the public and private sector. I am an accomplished businessman, having worked for a corporation, for a Fortune 500 corporation, was very successful there, and then having my own initiative, my own self-employed businesses, as well as being an accomplished artist. So if you're down on the Art Walk, go into 332 Main Street, and I've got a display there right now. I don't know if it's raining. I thought I heard rain. Anyway, I think we need a vision for the future. We are at kind of a cutting edge. So you can kind of vote for the status quo, which is fine. Lots of people don't want change. Or if you want change, but change that will make Longmont better, that will empower our community, that will refine it, but from a Longmont perspective, for Longmont needs and for Longmont citizens, that's what I'm about. Because there's testimonial out there that when I was...
Ron, thank you. Joan, your closing statement.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank the Observer for this opportunity to voice my opinions and to ask the residents for their vote for my re-election to the City Council. It's important to me, though, that we do not look at all of these issues that we've discussed and challenges in a vacuum. Everything we vote on and decide has unintended consequences, both positive and negative. In our reach for a bigger, brighter, stronger Longmont, we do not leave out the most vulnerable of our population, which are the seniors and elderly, the homeless population, and our children. That we do not forget that we're a very diverse community of Latinos, Latinas, Vietnamese, Japanese, Nepalese, and so many more. I'm kind of a private person, so I haven't really said much about myself up here because even though I've lived in this city for 42 years, my life is pretty private, and I don't think that my private life has anything or very much to do with the issues that we have faced in our community. We have a very futuristic vision through the City Council's work plan that we adopted this year, and it gives us a path to move forward on all the challenges presented. We are getting a feasibility study on an art and convention center, and we are getting a feasibility study on our Main Street corridor plan and our South Main Street plan for development. We're visionary on our transportation plan. We are looking at transportation if we do pull out of RTD. All of these issues are being discussed at the moment, and I want to be on council to continue this work. So thank you, and please vote for Joan.
That concludes our debate. Let's thank the candidates for their participation in tonight's event. Once again, my name is Shaquille Dalal, a writer for the Longmont Observer. This debate was hosted by the Longmont Observer and the Longmont Museum. The Longmont Observer is a locally produced nonprofit newspaper. You can find more information about the Observer at longmontobserver.org or at our table in the lobby. We'll be back here at the Stewart Auditorium at the Longmont Museum on October 5th at 3 p.m. for the mayoral debate between Mayor Brian Bagley and Skylar Tobridge. Thank you.